In this video, we're going to cover the basic CSS in Dreamweaver as it applies to your website. Now, a couple very important reminders. I brought you here to show you what a mess you can end up with when you're experimenting. Now, I'm not going to start from this point, but I just want you to see how crazy it gets and give you a super important reminder to make copies of your entire folder. Another reminder is, especially for those of you who do want to experiment and do something other than I'm going to do, don't forget about our friend here, the W3 schools. Study the CSS section or go back to it for reference. One very important thing that'll come up as we start laying the site out is this box model and how, what the difference between the content, the padding, the border, and the margin are. So, and another big important reminder is always work from a defined site. So this was a site that I defined that I was doing some experimenting on, but I'm going to go back to where we left off. So in this case, I would go to Manage Sites. I would pull up the site that we were working on together. So I'll select that, click Done. We should see everything repopulate here. Close up this page that was left open, double click on the index page, and then we're back to where we were. Now, what I want to do is go to that folder, wherever I keep my folder. Here it is right here, and I want to make a copy of that. So I'm going to drag this out, and that's good, or probably a more logical sequential numbering system, like _001, so they all stay in order if you have these inside of another folder, for example. But this way I know if the one that we're working on goes bad, I can go back to this one. Then the next time I do the same thing, but copy it with a 2 on it, so I know that the lower the number is, the further back in time it is. Okay, so we're going to be working a lot over here with the CSS Designer panel. And as always, standard mode and reset standard. That'll get us looking as similar as possible, but whenever you can't find something that I'm using over here, it's always going to be under Window. All right, same with all Adobe products, basically. Okay, so CSS Designer. First thing we need is a new style sheet. So I will click this right here, add new CSS source, create a new file since we don't have one. It's going to end up being a link. Even though we don't have anything, we still click browse to get this process started. And if your view is small like this, just click this caret. And we want to save this as main.css, meaning that's our main CSS page, and we want to put that in a folder, and we're going to call this _styles. Now this is going to help us because most of the time when the program adds stuff, it puts it in a folder just called CSS. So this will help us if we're hunting down our file versus theirs in the future, or need to delete stuff if we're experimenting. So there we go. We created the folder. That's the file name we want. We are going to click Save. So that all looks good as a link, and click OK. Okay, so now that we have our main CSS, and if we look in the code over here, we can see that it has placed in the head this link to our page. Now we can go ahead and let's start with the most basic, body. So what we'll do is we'll highlight body over here in the code, and then we will click on the plus sign next to selector. And then here's where your knowledge that you learned in making that simple CSS site comes in handy. Make sure that it says what you would be manually writing for. So if it says more than just body in here, you would want to change that down to body. And then you can always go over and look at the main CSS after you write it and make sure that it looks good. So we'll just try something real simple like putting in a color for the body. So we will go ahead over here, just click return, and then we'll go to where it says properties, And probably by default, this show set might be checked. And what that does is it just shows what you have written for. So for the most part, you're going to want to uncheck that so you see all the possibilities. And they're separated by these little tabs here. So what we want to do is go to background, and we'll just double click here in the background color, pick a color. And when you're just experimenting, it helps to pick really bright, borderline obnoxious colors just to make sure that it's working. So I hit return, and we can see in preview that it's working. It's always a good idea now to go File, Save All. Get in the habit of Save All, because we're not only just writing a page here that just really has a link on it, but we're also writing on that linked page, the CSS page, all the stuff. So let's take a quick look at the CSS and see what's been done. And this is another thing that your knowledge will help on, is sometimes because I clicked on body more than once, it wrote body in here more than once. So you know better. So you can say, okay, that's extra garbage there. So right here, here's the body with the background color put in. For some reason that changed. No, that looks like red. Maybe I just have to refresh here. Yeah, that's all it was. Okay, so we see that. Once again, we'll go up to File, Save All. Since we made a change, we'll go to File, and then we'll go to Real-Time Preview. And for the most part, I'll be using Chrome. And then you can see now the whole entire background has changed. Now we can go in and start to make the design look a little bit more like our own. Now, two things on this. One is if you have very similar colors and it's going to be hard for you to tell what's going on, you may want to stick with really bright, obnoxious colors at first, like bright blue, green, reds, so that you can see where the difference between the header and the background is, and if there's padding and margins being put in there, what they belong to. Also, there's a difference in how you interpret. If we look at this design, this being the design, we have the black here, which is just a black background in Photoshop, but how does that translate to the web? Is this the background, like black? I'm going to assume for this tutorial that our background color is this gray, so that if our browser got infinitely big, got wider, it would fill with gray. And the same thing with the header, it would fill with black. And then when we do an aside, we'll assume once again that the gray is the infinity and that this sidebar remains the darker color. So you probably, as you designed your site, wrote these colors down, which was smart. If you didn't, you can go ahead and sample them, find out what the color is in Photoshop. So we just grab the eyedropper tool, which if you just have this selected, the shortcut is the I key, and take a sample and just make sure that you are getting the right sample, that what's inside of that circle is the right color, because sometimes you might be over here and you accidentally pick the wrong thing. So and then you double click over here, copy the hexadecimal code. Now remember, if there's problems with your colors, it usually has to do with this pound sign. So when I copy this, I'm not getting the pound sign. When I go over to Dreamweaver, I need to put that in. So I can write the code by hand if I want, or we can keep working with the panel in Dreamweaver. So I'll switch back to my source code here, and we'll go into the body tag here, and then look at our properties, go into background, and then double click here, and then if I just paste right now, I won't have the pound sign. So what I'll do is I'll just delete up to the pound sign, Command V, paste that in there, and we can see we're a step closer. Then we'll go back to Photoshop, find out what our main text color is, write that down. Real quick, here's a better example of when you're not getting the right sampling. Like I'm clicking right on that color for the text, but I can see what it's sampling is not that color. So with the eyedropper tool selected, you may have to go up to this area here and make smaller the area that you're sampling. You can even go to point sample where it samples just that one pixel that it's on. And then you can see now if I move this down, that's an exact match to that color. And then once again, just go in here, copy this info, Okay, then back in Dreamweaver, targeting that body tag using these main headers, we'll click text, go for the text color, double click, punch in our color, preceded by the pound sign, hit return, and you can see again we're making progress. Talk a little bit about styling the fonts. Remember cascading style sheets. The cascading means that the more further back, deeper in the code, like about as far back almost as you can go as body, if we define the text in the tag, the body tag, it means it'll be that unless it's overwritten later, like for an H1 tag. So we want to look at our design and see what the majority of the text is, especially in in the sections, the stuff that will be used over and over. And then the less specific stuff like the navigation and headers, then we can define that afterwards. So we go over here to font family, and this gives us those stacks that we talked about in the first project. It says, okay, I want my people to see Baskerville first. If they don't have that, then show them Palatino. If they don't have that, then show them this. If they don't have that, then show them this. And then all the way down to saying, okay, just show them a serif if they have nothing else on their computer. But nowadays, you can provide people the fonts via an external link so that you can make them see exactly what you want to see. The catch here, though, is if you don't own the program, you can't do this. So if you're working on the school computers, you can't do this. So I'll just show you very quickly for those of you who want to experiment with this. You click Manage Fonts, and then you go in here, you select a font. When you click to add it, it adds it back to the menu, and then you'd go in the menu and you would pick it, and then it would add a line of code here that would allow your end users to be able to pick up on that font. So if you can do this, good for you. That'll be awesome. If not, we go back here and we pick something that we think most people would have on their machines. So since mine started out with a sans serif, I'm going to pick this one. If I wanted it to start with Verdana, for example, I could just start with this. So I double click this, pick it, go into the main CSS, and look and see what it wrote for me. And then I could change this stack to say whatever I want. And you can see Verdana's way down the road here. I could move Verdana up here to the front, or any kind of editing that I want to do, like you learned in the CSS project. Also take care of our font size and the line spacing. Again, you can write that by hand in there if you want, or you can go over here. So for font size, I am just going to put in, hopefully you remember this, 1M. And then for the line height, and again, 1M just means 100% of the default size. And then for the line height, that's AKA letting the distance between lines of type. A generous amount is pretty good on the web, so I would say like 1.5 M's or even 1.6 M's should do. And you'll see as soon as I type that in there, that'll give us a little more spacing there. And there we go, looking better. Okay, we'll save the navigation for later. We'll also save this contact for later, so that's where it helps to make a good checklist of things. But let's take care of this H1 and H2 tag. Looks like the H1 is the same color as the rest of the type that we set. So this one we need to get the color, and we'll make those tags. Back in Dreamweaver, I'm going to select source code so that I can click on the H1. And then I am going to go ahead and click on plus, make sure that it just says H1, and there's an example of where it doesn't, so I will just put H1 only in here. Come on, there we go, H1, enter, click on the properties, go to text, go to the color, put in my color in there with the pound sign in front of it. And then just have to be concerned with the size, and for that we will use M's. Okay, so you can see what I came up with here. Font size 2.7M and 1.7M for the H2 tag. looks okay for now, and I can also go in here and just put a space between all these things just to make it easier to troubleshoot, and that's good for now.